Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for December 8th through the 14th, 2024. So let's get right to it. As you can probably expect based on the title of this video, most of today I'm going to spend talking about the recent drone sightings or aircraft sightings in New Jersey. I did not intend to talk about this at great length. I was going to talk about it sort of like how I did last week, just kind of briefly, but apparently the internet has gone crazy over this, so I think a little bit more of a deeper dive is needed, mostly because I'm interested in this from the angle of how it's kind of a case study for analysis and information collection and things like that. This is, however, one of those contentious topics. This is a topic that a lot of people get very, very, very emotionally involved in and invested in one way or the other. So I have to be a little bit more delicate than I normally would be. For some reason, people don't really care if I talk for an hour and a half about Chinese H-6 bombers. They don't really care if I talk, for an hour and a half on, undersea cables. But when I talk about, potentially unidentified aircraft, a lot of people come out of the woodworks with a lot of vitriol. And I think that the point gets missed a lot of times. So just as my blanket disclaimer for today, I'm not going to try to convince you of what is going on. I'm just going to try to point out some things that I am thinking about and some of the things that may help you come to your own conclusion as to what's happening in New Jersey. Bottom line up front, I cannot say definitively what is going on in New Jersey, but I can explain about 80% of what's going on in New Jersey. That last 20% to get the full, well-rounded picture of what's going on is going to be a little bit hard to do at the moment because we just don't have that much information. And rather than try to really, really narrow down and just drill down to find that last 20% of the story, I think that a much better way of thinking about this is to be okay with understanding that you may not get the full story. You probably won't get the full story. And you have to accept that you're going to have to operate in an environment where you're going to have to make decisions based on incomplete information. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So, New Jersey, what is going on? Well, this started a few weeks ago with a few scattered reports of unidentified drones. This is how people were reporting them, unidentified drones. Really, they should have said unidentified aircraft at that moment because we cannot be sure that whatever these things are autonomous. They could be manned, piloted aircraft. But anyway, we'll call them drones because that's what the internet seems to think they are. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, people started reporting seeing drones at night over their houses, over their homes, in great quantities sometimes, and it sort of snowballed from there. So immediately we have kind of an initial incident and then the follow-on once people started paying attention, and I think that's one of the more interesting and important things to consider with regards to what's going on. So, since this has hit the internet and people have gotten kind of spun up on this, a few things have happened. For one, the local authorities have put out some very questionable information simply because they have very few resources on the ground. A local police department has almost zero resources, in some cases very much zero resources, to track any kind of aerial object. If we remember, in terms of airspace, it doesn't matter if it's an inch off the ground, that's a federal thing. So in terms of tracking any kind of aerial threat, that's largely going to be on the feds, and the locals are not going to have the resources to do that. So they've put out a lot of questionable information. I don't think they're doing it intentionally, but for instance, the governor's made statements, they don't know what they are, but they're investigating. Local PD, the local sheriff's departments and local police departments have put out, they don't know what they are. The feds have come out and said they don't know what they are either, but this has gone all the way up to NORAD, NORTHCOM kind of thing. Everyone has basically said the federal stance all the way down to the local stances, we don't know where they are. Now, of course, all of this is just raw information, okay? This is not intelligence. Raw information is raw information. You have to process it using some sort of analytical method to arrive at a finished intelligence product. Unfortunately, there's a lot of contradiction in the information that we're getting. Some localities say they're commercial aircraft. Some localities say they're military aircraft. Some localities say they don't know what they are. There's a lot of contradiction here. So this is where we get very little traction with regards to a solid assessment of what these things are. Perhaps the most important bit of information is what many might consider to be an intelligence gap, which is something that we don't know. Well, the absence of information is not an intelligence gap. The absence of information on something is, in fact, an informational data point. So we'll get more into that in just a moment. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too quickly. So let's talk about the top sort of 5 theories that the internet seems to think these aircraft are. First theory is they're somehow government. The government's lying and that they are some kind of military or CIA kind of drone or manned aircraft, and they're doing testing in the New Jersey area around Fort Dix, around the classic testing sites, right? So that's theory 1. Theory 2 is that they are a foreign adversary, right? So it is, in fact, a hostile aircraft, and the government's trying to cover it up like they did the Chinese spy balloon sort of incident. The third theory is that this is just all one big hoax, like it got started based off of an erroneous report, and then once people started paying attention, they started noticing all of these other hoax kind of things, and this is all just one big game. Fourth theory is that this is mass hysteria, that we're not seeing anything, that we got started with one erroneous report, and now people are seeing commercial aircraft, and there are no drones whatsoever. And the fifth theory is, of course, aliens, right? So don't need to go into that one too much because that one's kind of self-explanatory. Again, there's very little information to kind of point us in the right direction here. But considering what I have seen, all of the information that has come out, all of the data points that I have seen, all of the video and photo evidence that I have seen, let's focus on a couple of theories. Let's focus on theory 1 and theory 2 for the moment, because that has the most serious implications for the daily lives of anyone out there, right? So let's talk about government-controlled drones or foreign or unknown adversary-controlled drones. So drilling down a little bit further into these theories, the theory that they are government-controlled can vary widely. So this is a theory that can sort of be in multiple categories if you want to think about it like that. The first theory is the most benign, right? The government is testing these drones. They're testing some kind of autonomous aircraft, and they picked the busiest sector of commercial airspace in the United States to do it because they're trying to test vectoring. Maybe like some AI-controlled aircraft through commercial airspace. And that's what these drones are. Not a bad theory. That would explain why this government testing, if this theory holds true, that would explain why this testing takes place in congested airspace. Again, why are they not out there at Groom Lake? Why are they not out there in Alaska or some of these other very remote places where they can easily test aircraft out of the public eye? Why are you testing aircraft in highly densely populated areas? Well, it could be because of the airspace. That could be it. So that's one theory. Another vastly more nefarious theory is that they're not actually testing, they're operational. And there is some kind of Mission Impossible-esque threat out there, some kind of Tom Clancy-esque threat that's out there that the U.S. government is trying to mitigate. They're trying to save the world, right? And they don't care that the public knows about their new secret toys, right? That's a very far-fetched theory, but I have seen it repeated quite a lot, so I'll kind of mention it. Underneath this category is that they are some kind of nuke sniffing, nuclear detection, radiological detection aircraft, and they're trying to find a missing nuclear warhead, right? This is what the internet kind of conjures up in terms of this sort of thing. Just right off the bat, I think this particular theory is very, very unlikely because we already have purpose-built aircraft for that, and they fly without transponders on all the time. And why risk giving away a lot of state secrets when you don't need to? So, radiological threats, I mean, they're fairly easy to track, fairly easy to find. So, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like that's a very likely theory. But again, please don't get bent out of shape because I don't particularly ascribe to your favorite theory. I'm just trying to move through this, okay? So the last theory, and I think this one holds a little bit of weight. I don't know if this is I think this is absolutely 100% happening, but I don't know if this is why the whole incident has gotten started to begin with. And this theory is that this is all a propaganda campaign. This is all a psyop to get us to ban drones, commercial or civilian grade drones. Yeah, that's happening. You've already gotten several politicians that have put forth bills to ban drones, right, or ban something. You know, anytime a crisis happens, a politician's already gotten something pre-written to take away, you know, liberties in this country. So that's absolutely happening. Would they go to this length to do that, though? I mean, they can just pencil up anything. They don't need to go scare half the country because of this. If they wanted to tyrannize us, they just do what they always do. They're just going to pencil whip it anyway, right? There's no real, I personally don't think there's any real need to go to this great length to mess with us, to get us to do something in terms of banning drones. They could easily, the drones are managed under the FAA, right? Federal agency, executive branch. They could do it with an executive order. Why bother with this? So those are the three main government-controlled theories. Now let's step into nefarious land for a moment, and let's examine the kind of alarm bell sort of idea, and that is that they may be foreign-controlled. Well, as I wrote in the Wire, the very long Wire report I wrote a few days ago, the Iranian theory obviously is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, and it kind of embarrasses me that I have to treat it with a little bit of credibility because a politician said it. But no, there's no way on this earth that Iran has this capability to do this in New Jersey at the present time, at the time that this occurred. So that's just kind of very much not something possible. Now, who else could do it? Well, it could be malign actors on U.S. soil. You know, it could be some kind of intelligence gathering effort. It could be some kind of probing sort of test response kind of thing. That holds a lot more weight than the Iranians having some kind of, you know, drone carrier parked off the New Jersey coastline. That's just not, that's not very likely. However, you know, I would be very, very surprised if the Chinese were not behind some of this, at least some of these reports. Maybe not all of them, but if the Chinese were not taking advantage of all of this insanity that's going on to spy on stuff like, you know, critical, you know, like Picatinny Arsenal, for instance, or the, you know, big military bases in the region, I'd be kind of surprised if the Chinese did not want to do that. So that's occurring. Like, I would be willing to bet it's definitely occurring because we see this all around the world, really. American military bases being, you know, reporting drone flyovers and things like that. So our foreign adversaries, both at home and abroad, are definitely using drones to spy on American military bases and here in the U.S. spy on critical infrastructure. That is 100% happening. We've known this for many, many years. But is that what's happening in 100% of the reports, 100% of the time? I don't know. I don't think so. It's hard to say. Sort of within that subset of theories of malign actions, I think that now that people have realized that they can shoot at these things, or rather, I mean, they'll throw you underneath the jail for shooting at one of these things. But now that people have realized that they are within small arms range of the ground, I think what's happening is a lot of TikTok influencers are pushing people and encouraging people to shoot at these things, and it turns out they're actually civilian airliners. So what better way to conduct a terror attack without even actually having to do anything at all? All you get is you pay a Chinese click farm to boost a video, and there you go. Now you've encouraged how many idiots on the ground to shoot at an American commercial airline, and you didn't have to set foot in the United States at all. That, my dear friends, is a very sinister and nefarious thing, and I think it's happening. I think it's happening right now, and I think it's probably going to get worse. So, again, this is very, very dangerous. This is not good, and I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, just for the record. Do not shoot at these things. Because, as I'll get to in a moment, I haven't seen any photographs or videos of these things, these aircraft that are not commercial aircraft. Every single photo and video I have seen has been of either commercial aircraft or a DJI quadcopter hovering in somebody's backyard. I have not seen anything that actually tells me these things are military or anything other than just commercial aircraft. But again, Please don't get bent out of shape that's what I have seen, right? But I just wanted to make that abundantly clear, because there are people who are taking advantage of this right now, and it's creating a very, very dangerous situation. And that just needs to be stressed exceptionally strongly, because this is getting out of hand, which is why I'm talking about it for so long, right? So let's bring back in our 5 kind of theories here that I've seen floating around. And let me just examine one of them in the context of risk assessment, right? So why do we care about this? Why is it worth dedicating so much time to this? Well, because I think it's a textbook case of risk assessment, right? The likelihood that something will happen and the impact, the damage that will occur if that thing does happen. So for instance, let's take the foreign adversary intelligence collection kind of thing. So looking at our chart here, if that's the theory that we're going with, that these are some kind of, armed, IED-laden drone, right? The chances that something bad will happen, the probability, the likelihood that something bad will happen is almost certain, right? You're not going to build one of these things and just fly it around and look at things. You're going to fly it around until you find a target, right? So assuming for a moment, again, we're wargaming this here for a moment. So again, likelihood that something bad will happen is very, very high if this is indeed a foreign adversary, right? Again, this is subjective to some degree, I will admit. There are other ways of drilling down risk assessment a little bit more accurately. There are a lot of questions and things like that you can go through, but just for now, let's go with it. So we can say that the likelihood of something bad happening is almost certain if these are a foreign adversary. Now, also, if these are a foreign adversary, how bad could it be? What's the severity? What's the consequence if this was some kind of mass armed drone attack like we might see in Ukraine or something? Well, I would say that the damage could be catastrophic. Imagine if you've got just 5 of these drones and they've got 5 IEDs on board and they go to 5 different targets in the same area. That could potentially be very, very bad. So, again, if we look at our risk management matrix, if we have a likelihood of almost certain and a consequence of catastrophic, you see we're over here in the black. We're over here in critical land, which is why we go through this process. This is why we assume it's a hostile attack and then walk it back. All right, so we assume it's hostile and then walk it back, just like we did with the Chinese spy balloon. We start off, holy cow, these things are here to kill us, and then we walk it back once we realize what the situation is. Now, the problem is that we do have that Chinese spy balloon incident, and more importantly, we know what the government did in that case. So our own risk assessment gets skewed a little bit, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I go through all of this, this risk assessment kind of line of thinking to lead into what I think is happening. Now, again, this is purely subjective, purely my opinion, based on very little tangible, evidence, really. But let me share what I think is happening and how things have kind of unfolded, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth and what it means, right? So here's what I think happened. I think that the U.S. government started off testing a drone or 2, maybe even a manned helicopter like the Pivotal Arrow, a few other experimental drones perhaps in the region, just as kind of a testing thing. And then somebody saw it. Okay, somebody saw the initial drone or something like that, and then a bunch of stuff happened. So, in short, I think once that first observation occurred, a lot more people started paying attention, and then we started getting more reports, right? And a lot of them turned out to be erroneous reports, as we'll talk about in just a moment. So I think that this led and a skewed decision-making process and a skewed risk assessment process and a skewed analytical process led to vastly more sightings. Okay, so these are sightings that aren't really real, and that has in turn led to mass hysteria, and this has just snowballed into kind of an event that we just can't recover from, right? Now, I say all of that to say this. I think the initial incidents were probably something we should pay attention to. I'm not really paying attention to what's going on right now because it's just mass hysteria. It really is. Go on the internet and you will see a lot of people just panicking over nothing. Literally, photographs so clear, I can tell you what airline that commercial airline is flying under, and people are saying it's a drone or a UFO. People are flipping the images around. Even Fox News took an image that was shot in portrait, and they turned it to landscape, and of course it looks like a UFO. But if you straighten it back up the way the photograph was originally taken, guess what? It's like a Delta flight or something. So I think this mass hysteria that we've gotten into now is causing this to snowball, and it's just too hot. We're going to have to wait a few weeks for things to calm down and figure out what actually happened. So it makes it very, 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 very hard for people like me to go back and find the initial reports, because there are an awful lot of people in New Jersey who saw something. There are an awful lot of people who have seen something, and it's legitimate, and I believe them fully. I want to stress that I know what it's like to see something, and everybody else dismiss you and say, and gaslight you and just say, no, you didn't really see that. So I'm not trying to do that, right? I know there's a lot of people out there who saw something legitimate, who have witnessed this thing, who have observed it, and they're intelligence people, and they saw something. Unfortunately, we're now in the realm of all of that legitimate good information being tainted by all the idiots out there. So that's what I think is happening. I think it's now a combination. It probably started off as being a legitimate thing, and then once people started paying attention, it snowballed from there. We've got bad reports from the locals who don't know what to do, and I'm not saying they're doing this intentionally. They just don't have a frame of reference for dealing with hostile aircraft. They just don't. After the Chinese spy balloon incident, you know how many police departments, had a round table and said, hey, what do we do if people start calling in about a hostile aircraft? Nobody did this. I don't know of any police jurisdiction that said, hey, let's have a little war game right now. Let's talk about what we're going to do if the Chinese spy balloons show up again. Nobody did that. Not even big DOD did that, as far as I know. So there's that. Also, the fact is that if you were a Chinese spy in New Jersey and you saw all this hysteria online, you would take advantage of that. You would absolutely start flying your own DJI branded spy platforms out there. You would absolutely take advantage of the fray and all these fake reports and all this hysteria to go do your own real reconnaissance, right? So now I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing a lot of hoaxsters taking advantage of things. We're seeing a lot of legitimate spying operations taking advantage of things, and we're seeing a lot of people who are not aware of what's going on out there. I saw a video last night of someone showing a video of tracer rounds and rocket fire hitting the ground from some unknown aerial platform. Well, if you dig into it just a little bit more, you realize that the Fort Dix McGuire area is doing training right now. It's a large, military base, and they're doing aerial gunnery. They're, shooting out, with door gunners and with their Apaches and things like that. So this is standard, but now that people are looking at it, it's become a huge thing. So again, I'm really interested in this. In terms of what the initial reports are, I'm very interested in this, and the people who said these things hovered over their houses. They hovered really, really low. Somehow we don't have any photographic evidence of that, but people are saying it, so we have to kind of treat it with a little bit of credibility at the moment. Just again, going back to that risk assessment mentality. If I've got 50 emails from people saying this thing hovered over my house, at an altitude of like 100 feet or so, I've got to look into that to some degree, right? All 100 people, none of them gave me a photograph, but like if I've got 100 people in my inbox that say this happened and they saw it, well, I've got to look into that. So it makes it hard when you've got a lot of fake reports and all the Chinese spies come out of the woodwork. And do you see how it's been kind of a long week here with this kind of thing? So all in all, I don't know what these things are. I don't know what is going on. I know that something happened. Something is happening. I don't know if it's still happening, though, because it could be just a runaway thing now. We could, in a week or so, find out that the drones stopped flying 5 or 6 days ago. They just did it for one night. They did some testing for 2 or 3 nights, and then it kind of went away, and people started seeing commercial aircraft. It could just be anything. So again, I'm sorry to kind of talk for half an hour on this and not really give you any closer answers, but just kind of salvage this one today. Let's talk a little bit about some things to consider when it comes to these events happening more often, or happening in the future, because I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, we may not know what this incident is. We may not know what's going on in New Jersey right now, but the whole world is watching, and the whole world is watching the American continent freak out over this. And now everybody, from a YouTube prankster to a nation state, knows that all they got to do is fly a weird-looking drone over an area for a few nights in a row, and the mass hysteria will occur. So if this incident has ensured that this will happen again, and it will happen somewhere else. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the things that you can look out for and things to consider when it comes to this happening elsewhere. So again, I know pretty text heavy, but let's go through it a little bit. First of all is the sourcing. Anytime you see something that's crazy on the internet, consider the source. And I don't mean the account that posted the video or the photograph. I mean the original primary source. For those of you who don't know what a primary source is, the person who took the video. So if I'm standing on a mountaintop with my phone and I'm videoing or taking a picture of something, I am the primary source, okay? Almost none of the photographs and the videos that I have seen have come from someone videoing something in the sky and then turning around and posting it on their social media. It has always come from a content farm. It has always come from some kind of engagement farming account that's known to do that. So please consider the source and whether or not the source is the primary. Okay, because if it's not the primary source, that means it's a secondary or sometimes tertiary, or sometimes 8 or 9 sources down the line, and the same video gets repeated and repeated and repeated. And guess what? I can't interview, I can't email, I can't contact the person who took that initial video to ask them questions, right? I can't examine, because most social media strips out the metadata of a file. I can't examine the metadata. I can't get the geolocation of where they were at when they saw something. So you see all these critical things that I need to perform an investigation, I can't get because some content farm is out there pushing a video which is probably fake. So again, consider that and consider whether or not these content farms have a financial interest in pushing very grainy Bigfoot style videos, right? Because they absolutely have a financial interest in most cases. Also, we have to consider equipment and survivorship bias. I'll talk about these at the same moment. Have you ever wondered why all of the videos of UFOs and all of the videos of Bigfoot are grainy, awful quality videos? Have you ever wondered about why that may be the case? Now, I'm not saying that they all are. There are some that are, I'm sure, quite clear. However, most of them are very, very grainy, very low quality. Why is that? Well, because someone who's using their phone or using a low-quality camera out there, they may look at this and see a blur, okay? And they think that blur is something else. However, if somebody out there has got a big honking telephoto lens on a professional or even just a consumer-grade camera like this one, they may be able to look and see, that's obviously not Bigfoot, so I'm not going to take the picture. Or that's obviously a commercial aircraft, that's not a UFO or anything like that. That may be why we don't see anything. So someone who is standing on a mountaintop and they've got this camera in their hand and they look and they look and they look and they see, all right, this is a commercial aircraft, pretty cool, maybe make for a good photo, but it's not a UFO, it's not a drone, it's a Delta flight or something. They're on mountaintop A, but across the valley on mountaintop B is Captain Idiot here with his smartphone, and he's getting the world's worst quality video because he can't see that it's not a UFO, so he posts the video online, and here we go. So again, survivorship bias. We are only seeing the grainy videos as UFOs or any kind of drone activity, right? Because somebody with a better camera doesn't post the photo because they know it's a commercial aircraft. They can see, right? So you have to remember, equipment matters. I would be very, very, very interested in somebody getting a DSLR with a good telephoto lens at night. I mean, these things are lit up. They're lighted, so you don't even have to have night vision or thermal or anything. Just give me a photograph from a DSLR with a decent telephoto lens. That's all I'm asking for. And when people do that, I know a lot of people who have messaged me saying, hey, I've been out there. I'm a professional photographer. I've gone out there every single night. I haven't seen a single UFO. Well, yeah, how many commercial aircraft did you see? I saw, 30 to 40 commercial aircraft. Well, Captain Idiot over there on the next mountain says, I saw 40 UFOs. Do you see how we can have a survivorship bias kind of situation? Because people, they aren't able to discern that they're seeing a UFO, but the guy across the hill over there is seeing commercial aircraft because he's got better equipment. So again, survivorship bias. You only get the grainy videos because the clear videos that are taken show that it's something that is not noteworthy. So again, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble with this, but it's always been very fascinating to me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be insulting or demeaning or anything, but it's always been very, very interesting to me about how everyone in their cousins got a camera like this nowadays, and yet we don't really get any good photos of anything. So because the people who do have these cameras and do take pictures of these sorts of things, they're in the right area, they're in the access, they see something, they photograph it, discern that, okay, that's a commercial aircraft, and then they move on, right? Whereas the people who don't, they're driving down the freeway and they got their phone, out their driver's side or out their windshield. They don't have the perspective, they don't have the equipment to see. If they had, I guarantee you that right now, at least in New Jersey, I can't speak to everywhere else, but if you were to put a camera like this in the hands of all of those people who took those initial photographs, you would probably see that it's just commercial aircraft. But again, I don't wish to be insulting, I don't wish to be demeaning. It's just something that I've thought about because there's a lot of people who live in New Jersey, a lot of professional photographers there, and not seen a whole lot of content from them on it because I think there's a survivorship bias thing going on. Another thing to consider is what I'm calling the sketchy government response, and that is how this response to these drones, right, has differed from the Chinese spy balloon incident. Okay, the Chinese spy balloon incident was very, very embarrassing for the U.S. government. Why? One, because they didn't plan on the incident. Okay, so they did not plan it, they had no hand in it, and therefore, the bigger factor, they had no control over it. China was bending us over the barrel, and we had no recourse for it that the Pentagon or the White House was willing to take until after the spy job was done, right? So the U.S. government was very embarrassed by that. They had no ability to control things. You could see there was a visible flustering. People got very upset. They were a little annoyed during press briefings. So you can see that's a whole different dynamic to what is going on now. The U.S. government now has said, don't worry about it. And basically there's no response. It's very, very strange. Now, a lot of you may say, well, of course, they're just lying. They're just covering it up. They're trying to take up for China or take up for an insurgent, and they're trying to encourage insurgents to attack us while they're saying nothing's going on. That's very, very true. That could happen. But my own instinct, again, pure opinion here, my instinct is telling me you're seeing the response of a government who knows what's going on and has control over it. Notice what I said. Take very good care to notice what I said. You're watching the response of a government that knows what's going on and has control over it. You're not watching the response of a government who knows what's going on but doesn't have control over it, like the spy balloon. The U.S. government knew what was going on with the spy balloon and they had no control over it. Now, you're watching the response of a government who knows what's going on and probably has some control over it. Do you see how that's my harebrained theory right now? It seems to me like the DoD both knows exactly what's going on and they have a hand in it somehow. Otherwise, they'd be a little bit more upset. They'd be a little bit more nervous if the Iranians or some other, malign actor was out there flying drones, over power plants or military bases. They'd be a little bit more upset than they are, I think, because they don't care about American Homeland Defense. They care about being embarrassed. That's what they care about. So, nobody's embarrassed over this. Nobody's a little annoyed. Nobody's, tense or terse during an interview. They're just like, don't worry about it. Well, what does that do for one? One, it gets all the schizos all up in arms, because anytime the government says don't worry about something, you should absolutely worry about that thing. So there's that. But is that what's happening in this case? I don't know. I think the government's giving us the vibe that they know what's going on. They have a hand in it. And this is just a last hurrah of, the DoD messing with us or doing something. I don't know. But that's what it seems like to me. So, again, I did not mean to talk about this in this much depth, but I figured now is as good a time as any because this has just gotten out of control. So let's, again, talk about some things to check, okay? If you want to be a little bit more proactive, even if you completely disagree and you don't trust me, fine, don't trust me. Like, do your own research on this sort of thing. Think for yourself. Like, don't listen to what somebody else is saying. Examine what does that word confirmed mean. Examine the sourcing of things. Think critically, right? I can't do that for you, right? So if you're wanting, even if you completely disagree with things, you think I'm some kind of shill or some kind of secret government agent or something, or a grand cover-up or something, go with that. Think that all you want, right? But here are some things to check if you want to be a little bit more active, a little bit more proactive, and you want to try to dig down and figure out what the truth of these things really is. The first mistake I see a lot of people use is with regards to aircraft tracking apps. Please understand how aircraft tracking works. I've seen a lot of people try to be proactive and try to do the right thing, but they miss a step, okay? Or they do something slightly wrong. And what they'll do is, you may see this all the time, all over the internet, all over Twitter right now, which is, hey, I saw this thing, I saw this drone, here's this grainy video, I checked flight tracking apps and nothing was there, and that must mean it's a drone, right? No, it doesn't mean it's a drone, it doesn't mean it's anything. Because you may, first of all, that could be a lie, okay? Second of all, they could be using the flight tracking app incorrectly, okay? First of all, a lot of the flight tracking apps will, if you download an app to your phone, for instance, if you download a flight tracking app to your phone, a lot of times those apps are paid, and the free version limits the number of aircraft you can see. Do you see where we may be going with this? So, again, you download a free, flight tracking app, and it's not going to show you all the aircraft. Another big error people make is choosing the wrong one, because, shocker, not all of the transponder modes that are out there with regards to tracking aircraft show up online. For instance, Flight Radar 24 does not have all of the aircraft, and they are well known to censor aircraft like military aircraft or some types of Mode S aircraft. If you want the best flight tracking website that there is, ADSB Exchange is probably your best shot. But even with ADSB Exchange, there are some things to be aware of. For instance, in this screenshot here off to the side, make sure you haven't deselected something. I've seen a couple of screenshots from people, or people have sent me a couple of messages where they say, oh, look, my flight tracking app doesn't show anything. And then sure enough, I look and see they have deselected all of the commercial aircraft on their map. So of course I'm not going to see anything. They've deselected it. So again, just make sure you're using flight trackers correctly. Make sure you're aware of how ADSB works, because guess what? ADSB is only one of many different ways of tracking aircraft. There are other ways, and not all of the platforms and websites out there use all of them. Mode S, for instance, Mode S it's a paradox. It's kind of older but newer. A lot of military aircraft do not even have ADSB. It's not that they're flying without their transponder. The aircraft just doesn't have the hardware on the actual aircraft itself to use ADSB. A lot of them use Mode S. And that's a kind of a hard thing to do, because a hard thing to track, at least, because you've got to have multiple receivers a lot of times. It's called multilateration. Again, we're getting into the nerd realm of things, but please, my bottom line here for this one is just make sure that you are aware of a few things. One, make sure you're using the app or the website correctly, okay? And two, make sure you understand that not every aircraft is going to appear on a flight tracking website, because not all of the flight tracking websites have all of the aircraft, okay? Sometimes they just don't show up. It doesn't mean they're flying with their transponder off. It just means that the sensors used by that website, right, to feed data into that website, maybe they just don't have coverage in that area. Now, for instance, in New Jersey, coverage is pretty good, but there are a lot of different transponder modes, and not all of them show up. So just be advised of that. Normally, this isn't an issue, because out of the tens of thousands of aircraft that fly around this country every day, I don't know, there may be 5 or 6 per state that just don't show up on, the radar. For instance, like for me, in my area, I've got a lot of, hilly terrain, a lot of low-flying aircraft, and guess what? I'll have an aircraft fly over my house, and it doesn't show up on the website because there's nobody in my area feeding in to like Flight Radar 24 or ADSB Exchange, so it doesn't happen. But my own little off-grid flight tracker clearly sees it, right? So just something to be mindful of. Something else to be mindful of is please know how to report information. If you see something strange or out of the ordinary, please understand and know how to report this kind of thing. So for instance, I here have the SALT report, size, activity, location, and time. That's the bare minimum, okay? Again, more of a military kind of thing. But really just the short version is we need to know how many you're seeing, what are they doing, where are you, and where is the thing that you see. If you can get a compass bearing on it, that'd be really helpful, and the time of day that you see it. With those 4 data points, I can isolate it and determine whether or not it's a commercial aircraft. Okay, very easy. That's all you need. So if you're thinking about posting a viral video, or if you're looking at a viral video about something, ask, what's the SALT report? What's the salute report if you want to be a little bit more, technical with it, or a slightly different version of the report. But SALT reports are the bare minimum, right? Also, know your equipment. If you are trying to take a photograph and try to take a video of it, please understand how your phone camera works, okay? Because you may or you may not be getting all of the detail. For instance, even with, say, like a DSLR or something, a RAW photo, if you're shooting in RAW, or instead of just in JPEG, you're going to get a lot more detail. You're going to get a lot more information stored in that file that people like me can use to analyze. So if I had a preference, I would say, look, set your DSLR to shoot in RAW, and then also, if you want to, most cameras have the ability to shoot in RAW and JPEG. The RAW is what you need if you're trying to do any kind of imagery analysis, so that you can have a lot more dynamic range to work with. You'll see it's like night and day throwing images in some kind of editing software with regards to that. So again, I would be willing to bet that probably 99% of these drone reports could easily be determined to be commercial aircraft if somebody would just shoot in RAW with a DSLR, or shoot in the highest possible mode for your phone camera. And also be mindful that when you upload a photograph to social media is going to absolutely destroy the quality of that photo. It's going to compress it quite a bit. Even if you tell it not to, it's still going to do it. So just be mindful of that. And also, this is more of a kind of a psychological thing, I guess, but be aware of human nature on this. Most of the time, like I have written here, most of the time people are going to see what they want to see, not what they actually see, right? So we need to be mindful if we are observers, and if we are observing something, we need just the facts, okay? You can add in your analysis. You can say, well, this is what I think it was, but for people like me, we need the raw information. Let me take care of the analysis, right? Your analysis is definitely something that I can note. But don't tell me you saw a drone. Tell me you saw an object, okay, that was marked in this way, flying in this direction. Do you see? Start giving me the raw details, and then at the end you can tell me you think it was a drone, okay? Because for somebody trying to aggregate this information, like maybe in an S2 shop, right? You may be getting reports from all over the place, and people are interjecting their analysis into it. But if I've got, say, 5 people who are in the same general area, and 4 of them tell me like a perfect SALT report or a perfect salute report, and the last guy says, well, it was a drone. Now I've got to go back to that one guy and ask him the other details. You see, we're slowing down, we're losing the ability to move fast with this, and it makes it harder to figure out what's going on with most of this. So again, ensuring a neutral state of mind is very, very important. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you go outside tonight and you go out there with the intention of trying to find ET or find a drone, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find ET or you're going to find a drone. That's how the human brain works. If you go out there with the goal of seeing something, you're going to find it. That's what happens. You're going to rule out all of the other information and narrow down on the one piece of information that confirms your bias, confirmation bias, right? So just be mindful of that, and also be mindful of the fact that right now in the United States, we are definitely primed. We are, even after COVID, even after the most intense information operations in human history, right? People are so primed. They are so ready to believe anything. They're so ready for something strange, right? They crave it, right? They crave the ET landings. They may not want to say that they do, but people are primed and ready for a little bit of misinformation, a little bit of propaganda. That little drop in the pond is just going to spread. So just be mindful that we are in a time when people will buy stories hook, line, and sinker just on the merit of it, okay? There's not a lot of critical thinking going on right now, unfortunately, and that's just kind of the way that it is. So when times are like this, we need to be extra careful, okay? We need to be extra careful. We need to have a lot more detail. We need to do a lot more due diligence, and we may need to spend a lot more time on things, because right now there's a lot of people that are scared. There are people that are absolutely terrified. They're terrified of everything from aliens to, Iranian drones. And that's not a good environment to operate in. It really isn't. So we need to do our due diligence to make sure that we're observing things in the most correct way. Now, that doesn't mean we're just going to be blind to what's going on here. This doesn't mean we're just going to immediately discount all of this as just crazy people. No, we're not going to do that. But we're going to examine things in a way that is more accurate and more reassuring and more professional and things like that. And this really leads into to one of my last points here, which is personal readiness, okay? Like I said in the beginning, we can explain maybe 80% of this stuff, but that last 20% is an unknown. I don't know if it's malign actors planning a terror attack and they're trying to stir people up and get people conditioned for it. I don't know if it's the government trying to make us all look like fools. I don't know if it's a YouTube hoaxer trying to make us all look like fools either. But I can tell you that 80% of this we can safely discount as not being a thing. But that last 20%, that's going to call you to be a little bit more ready. So what are you doing? Okay, let's just assume. Let's go back to the beginning, that risk assessment. Let's assume that it's a hostile action and your government doesn't care about you. What are you doing about it? Right? Like I have written here, if the average ET, hunter is going to outpace you in terms of readiness, what are you doing? If the average internet schizo out there can perform a little bit more, analysis than you, that may be slightly off, but they're at least doing it, right? So what are you doing to improve yourself? What are you doing to prepare for these kinds of things? Again, we can't live pegged out at, threat level midnight forever. But we can at least take some considerations. We can say, all right, well, this is a good opportunity to learn, and this is a good opportunity to improve. So, for instance, medical, just simple stuff, right? Are you carrying an IFAC at all times? This is 2024. If you're not doing that, why aren't you? And more importantly, out there, for those people out there who have families who are, obviously, a little kid's not going to carry an IFAC or something like that. A lot of times people's spouses are just not interested. So you have to weigh that. You have to weigh that into account. And are you carrying a large enough IFAC to cover several family members who might not be as prepared, minded as you are? So again, these are the kinds of things that you need to think about in terms of something as crazy as an internet phenomenon becoming potentially something vastly serious. I don't know. By the time this video comes out, these things could turn hostile, and we find out that it was some kind of mass terror attack being planned and orchestrated. I don't know. I can't tell you what the future brings, but I can tell you that preparing for some of these more severe outcomes is probably a pretty good idea. Comms. Again, we're dealing with aircraft here, potentially drones, maybe unmanned aircraft, maybe manned. But I can tell you, if the government knows that it's a drone, guess what's going to happen? They're going to jam that sucker if it turns hostile. Most likely, if NORAD gets involved or if Northcom gets involved or somebody gets involved, they're going to be jamming a couple of different things. One, they're going to be jamming the ground control station, so they're going to be jamming Wi-Fi. They're going to be jamming SATCOM, any SATCOM to it, just like the Chinese spy balloon. And they're probably going to be jamming any kind of cellular transmission. So, for instance, if big DOD, if the Pentagon decides, these things are actually bad and we're going to have to take them down, you don't want to be at work one day, sitting at your desk, and then suddenly the whole state of New Jersey goes black because, the Pentagon has decided to deploy assets to jam the entire eastern seaboard, right? So you don't want that kind of thing happening. So again, what is your lost contact plan? If you're sitting at work and the government decides, or somebody decides, we're going to jam these things now because we're going to be taking them down, are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to realize, I've been sitting at my desk. I normally get a text from my spouse every day at lunch. I haven't gotten that text today. What's going on? Do you have a plan for what to do if that happens? So having a lost contact plan in the event of a comms blackout is very important, especially now. More broadly, does your community have a plan? Again, I unfortunately have the rather unfortunate luck of being the poster child for somebody who lives in a community which is not exactly friendly. So I understand if people out there, if most people, or if many people, I don't know how many, but if many people out there have or live in communities that are not super friendly. It's unfortunate, but a lot of people do. Okay, a lot of people have not so great neighbors. A lot of people live in cities where they may not even know who lives around them, right? And good luck finding that out. But anyway, for the people who do live in good communities where anything short of your neighbors trying to kill you, right? If you live in a sort of amiable environment, do you have a plan? Do you have any kind of communication between all of you? Any kind of intelligence collection? You know, every neighborhood has got a gossip circle. Well, let's turn that gossip circle into something productive, right? Is there a way of sharing information more accurately, more quickly, off the grid if necessary? Do you see where we're going with this? It's maybe increases preparedness a little bit without looking like you're increasing preparedness, right? So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. If you're super prepared, and if you've got like a really good team or something like that, you may want to put together a set of PIRs, or Priority Intelligence Requirements. Basically, a master list of, if this thing happens, if 2A happens, call me or do this, right? That's basically what it is. So you can write down a lot of scenarios and things like that and say, all right, situation 3F has occurred. This is what we need to be notified. We need to tell everyone about 3F happening, right? So again, something to keep in mind. I don't think a lot of people are going to be using something as professional as a PIR, but you might. Who knows? Maybe small teams might do something like that. And finally, the last thing I wanted to kind of remind people of is to just know your gear, right? Know your equipment, know your gear when it comes to medical, firearms, bug out bags, whatever, right? Anything you may need. Know where critical phone numbers are stored. Know where all of your communications details are stored. Have all of this stuff ready to go at a moment's notice, because the last time you want to find out, oh, your flashlight's out of batteries, is when there's a potentially hostile aircraft that just crashed in your neighborhood, at 1 a.m. That's the last time you want to find that out. Again, not something a lot of people do, but I thought I would remind everyone just in case. And to wrap things up with a rather radical shift for a moment, I wanted to address something that has come to my attention. I've seen it, and I wanted to address it because dozens of you have sent me emails, messages about it, and I'm sorry I haven't responded to all of you. But the reason that I think that I wanted to spend so much today talking about this New Jersey stuff is because things in the Middle East are changing. And they're not changing for the better. And again, this shifts radically out of the realm of, hunting for UFOs and into the realm of national sort of diplomacy, national counterterrorism kind of thing. But you have to remember, all of this is kind of coming to me at the same exact time. And I think that it's kind of an interesting way of looking at things. So again, I wanted to address the one thing a lot of you have told me about, which is the recent interview that Sarah Adams did on the Sean Ryan show. For those of you who have not seen this interview, it's almost 2 hours long. Very highly recommend you checking it out. I will link it below if you have not seen it already. Essentially, the bottom line of this interview is, I think the key takeaway is Sarah Adams made a lot of claims with regards to the potential for terror attacks. And essentially, it's one of those interviews where you come away from it and think, okay, a mass terror attack is incoming. It is a very, very big deal. And I'll kind of let the interview kind of think about that. But one of the things that I can definitely personally attest to, as anonymous of a source as I am, my own personal testimony is this: what's happened in Syria over the past week or two has really highlighted one thing for me. It's highlighted many things, but one very important thing. And if you don't care about Syria, care about this, okay? Or at least think about this. Syria has proven that Al-Qaeda has changed, and they have changed in the way that they have been able to unite historic enemies to create kind of, Sarah calls it the Islamic army concept. That's as good a theory as any. But it's like a higher level Islamic unity kind of culture. We have all heard of ISIS, right? The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or just IS in the early days, the Islamic State. Well, what is that? Well, that was an effort to take some of the more extreme parts of, Islam, unite them underneath a nation state, a caliphate, right? An Islamic kind of system of governance or empire, if you want to use that term. Well, Syria, which I don't think Sarah talked about this directly in the interview, but I think what's going on in Syria very highlights and confirms what she's talking about is true, and I have known this to be true for some time. A lot of the older groups that have been out there have kind of let bygones be bygones for a while, and they have successfully united, more so than I think the West is aware of. So. Again, going back a few years, people think of Islamic State, they think, okay, well, this is a massive caliphate, it collapsed, it grew very quickly, and then it collapsed very quickly because the United States was targeting things like that. Well, while that was going on, the old school guys, Al-Qaeda, has been working, and they've been working hard. I think the very bottom line for this is that we have now been given evidence in Syria, where the more you read about Syria, the more you realize how complicated it is. But through all of that complicatedness, it all comes back to Al-Qaeda, right? It all comes back to one centralized organization that is running all of these smaller groups, which is why people are a little bit concerned, right? This HTS group, how did they come from? They came from Al-Qaeda, but they work with ISIS, right? A lot of their guys are former ISIS, but they're fighting ISIS. Well, that's all under the Al-Qaeda umbrella. So what does this mean for us? Well, it means that an attack is coming on the homeland. It's definitely going to happen. But it probably will not come from the people who you think that it might come from. So you may see this splinter group, this lone wolf attack, right, that's occurring. And a lot of the insurgent groups have changed their tactics. Like Sarah pointed out, this is definitely something that I have observed. I don't know how true it is, but I have come to this conclusion as well, that a lot of these insurgent groups, a lot of these lone wolf attackers aren't really lone wolf. They're getting their instructions from somewhere. Now, is it coming directly from Al-Qaeda? Probably not. It's coming through different channels. But basically, this means that we're at a period in time of heightened risk, right, for some kind of terror attack. Now, again, there's a debate as to whether or not, there's a debate rather about how serious this threat is. I think it's very serious, but I think that the attack is going to happen either way, but who we blame it on is going to be very, very different. That's just kind of what I think, and it's been kind of a universal truth for some time. Now, unfortunately, the very minute that you say something like that, all the war hawks come out and say, well, we need to invade another Middle Eastern country. I'm definitely not advocating for that. I'm just telling you what I think. And I think that we've been overdue for something for a long time. And we, in the kind of intel world, OSINT or not, we have to work on indications and warnings, right? We have to work on a lot of speculation a lot of times. And I think Syria, what's going on in Syria, even though the American people do not talk about it a lot, they don't care, this is a demonstration. Syria is your canary in the coal mine, okay? That insurgent groups, being probably financed by the CIA and Al-Qaeda at the same time, have been able to basically run circles around even the CIA and do what they want at the end of the day. So again, I think largely, again, pure speculation, but I think the CIA drove what's happening in Syria to wrap things up before the end of the Biden regime, and I think that's why that happened. But the fact that it was actually successful, that should be cause for concern, because usually the CIA's forays in the Middle East don't have the intended effect, at least not what the CIA wants. So yeah, I know it's big speculation land, but yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk about that because so many of you have pointed to this interview to me, and I feel like I had to kind of address it. And even though I'm going to talk about it at great length in just a few days, hopefully, because again, I'm trying to temper my own biases here, because it just so happens to be that this month's book club offering is The Attack by Kurt Schlichter, and yeah, so it's kind of the same thing, right? It's a fictional novel, right, that I'm kind of writing notes on, and it's basically what if October 7th, the October 7th attack in Israel occurred in the United States, and then this comes out the same way, and like I'm reading this the same week this interview comes out, and the same week that we see all these drone things, the same week that Syria collapses, and I'm just like, oh, goodness gracious, we've got so many of these things occurring at the same time. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to finally crack the seal on that and start talking about it a little bit more directly, because I've been thinking about this for some time, ever since, I don't know, maybe about 2015. This has kind of been what I've been expecting. So again, I'll get more into that later. I've already been way too verbose today, so I'll kind of call it there, and we'll see what I can come up with regards to the notes for this book, in the context of what may actually happen here in the U.S. So again, counterterrorism is not an easy job. It's not. You need a lot of money to be effective, and you need a lot of experience, and you have to work really, really, really hard. And it's just not something that a lot of people can do. And perhaps more perplexingly, and to tie this again back to the New Jersey thing, the government either doesn't care, they know what's going on and they still don't care, or they know what's going on and they're controlling it, or they're just incompetent altogether. Either way, pick your own favorite theory. Does that change your personal responsibility? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if it's Ahmed the Dead Terrorist or anything on a UFO flying down to land in New Jersey somewhere. It doesn't matter. Your personal responsibility remains the same. You're going to still need the same level of readiness. You're still going to need the same level of community. You're going to still need the same level of analytical thinking, risk assessment, right? Bayesian thinking, any kind of structured analytical technique. You're still going to need all that stuff, regardless of what it is. If it's some YouTube prankster out there making a fool of you, guess what? Doesn't matter. You've just learned something. You've improved. So even if it turns out to be something completely ridiculous, you're still at an advantage, right? So anyway, that's kind of my very long-winded take on that so far. I don't know how helpful this is going to be for anybody, but I hope that it is, and I hope that I'm able to get a little bit more coherent thoughts together next week. I know I say that every week, but I guess we'll kind of see how things go in terms of what actually occurs, because right now there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of new developments with regards to these New Jersey drones, right? But anyway, I guess we'll see what next week brings. But until then, thank you guys all for putting up with my sort of topical brief today. And thank you for all of your support. I really do mean that. Couldn't be doing it without you guys. So thank you for that. And we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.